Thank you all for joining us. This is ICUJP for Friday, June 9th, and we welcome you all here, whether you're present with us in the real time or you're watching this from our YouTube video or something that's the YouTube video of the next millennium. And, just know that we're all nice people. And we wanted to invite you to join us for a great talk on the labor movement and things that are happening in Los Angeles in the near future. And hopefully you'll be able to be involved as well. So Phil, if you had your reflection ready, we are ready to go.
Okay, I can do that. Let's see how I'm going to start it. A few weeks ago, I attended an event at the Pasadena Historical Society. It was called Two Pasadenas, Debate Over Internment Camps. It was kind of in honor of the Asian Pacific American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Okay. It was presented by Susie Ling, who is a professor of history and Asian American history at Pasadena City College. Susie and I have known each other for some time in discussions and presentations on this very topic, which is the history of the internment camps. My first thought when seeing the headline for this event was, are we still debating this? And my second thought was, damn right. There is a counter movement going on here. The event actually focused on those people and organizations who advocated for the Japanese and protected their properties and helped them ease back into American life after the war was over and the camps closed. Many of those people were Quakers and the American Friends Service Committee. My dad, John Way, was an employee of the American Friends Service Committee throughout the war years. And his assignment was, as soon as the internment happened, his assignment was to work as a liaison and advocate for the Japanese Americans being interned. And my namesake, Phil Wells, also a member of Orange Grove Friends Meeting, provided free medical services in the at the Manzanar detention facility. And Quakers locally and nationally provided a variety of services as well. Virtually the whole Quaker community provided re-entry accommodations and assistance when the camps were closed. I have vivid memories of my family's involvement from the time I was 3 years old. My awareness of this, I was sitting in my dad's car by the horse stables at Santa Anita Racetrack. And he was going in there to talk to people who were kind of in holding tank before going to Manzanar. That left a big impression on me. And it turned out that the reason for that meeting was to secure the Japanese American Community Center in Temple City as the temporary home for Pacific Aqua School to save it from being sold or repossessed or something. Anyway, I attended the seminar for two reasons. One was that my family and the Quaker community were among those who stood up for the internees. And number two, because it is still relevant. The relevance of this history today should be obvious to intelligent liberal people like you, but I'm going to say it anyway. In the years immediately following the events of September 11th, 2001, American Muslims were the victims of hate crimes and government persecution and detainments. The detention facility at Guantanamo Bay was a seriously illegal and cruel exercise in anti-Muslim hate, and it is still today. I seriously believe that we were on track for a mass detention of American Muslims, but the strong support by the Japanese American community, Quaker community, and other progressive organizations, I think, helped prevent that from happening. The Japanese groups raised the slogan, "Never again." Now, many governmental jurisdictions are passing laws threatening to pass such laws, making public protest a criminal offense. This could lead to mass arrests and reminiscent of the civil rights struggle in the South. And in some places, it has already begun. And now there has been a resurgence of anti-Asian and anti-Jewish hate crimes. Who knows where that might go? We are not done with persecution and detention of civilian Americans. We need to remember our history and continue to fight for basic human rights and constitutional rights. I think I could end it right there. The whole point of my comments has been that the memory, the history of the detention of Asian Americans is still a distinct possibility in this world we are in. We really need to stay vigilant, and because the tendency to be cruel and break the rules when you hear somebody is a very human condition, and we need to stay with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. That was really it resonates a lot in this era, especially as people in the political realm find out that once you peg somebody as a enemy, that wins you a lot of momentum in trying to get your way. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I think
I've had the pleasure of knowing Matthew for many years. We could figure that out because we go back through Bend the Arc in early meetings and in organizing. I was so impressed by Matthew, and have told him so recently, because he is living the life of an activist, and recently joined CLU to deepen and broaden his activism. I've invited him to talk about himself and what brought him to this point, but we were speaking recently. There's a major initiative going on in Los Angeles to support workers' rights, and to see leadership taking so much responsibility, waking up every day, doing the hard work that it takes to organize communities and to advance the cause of justice and workers' rights. So it's a personal pleasure for me to introduce Matthew Hom.
Thank you so much, Steve, for that very kind and generous introduction. It's also been an honor to organize and build justice for you for so many years. And thank you, Rick, for hosting this incredible meeting, and Phil for that really powerful reflection, and something that I'm going to continue to reflect on and let it move me for the rest of the day and beyond. So I'm going to put in the chat my contact information, and also a link to like one Google Doc where I've put like all the information that I'm going to be sharing today, including all the links for you to find later. So if everyone actually just wants to take a minute and sort of like, if you're on a computer, just open that link and have it on your browser so you have it later, or maybe there's a way for us to send it later in case people lose track of it. But this is where you'll be able to find all the information later on. And also you can, of course, reach out to me directly. So as Steve mentioned, I am the faith-rooted organizer in Los Angeles and Santa Monica at CLU. I'll mention the amazing organization CLU and all the incredible justice work we do in a minute. But I am someone who has been doing justice work as my focus for, I would say at this point, 7 or 8 years. So in some ways, I'm far along my journey, and in some other ways, I'm still at the beginning, right? In so many ways, I still have much to learn, and I always am learning and building in my justice skills and knowledge from being in community with amazing faith leaders like you all, and those in our committees at CLU, and those from so many backgrounds and communities and walks of life. I am Jewish. I come from the Jewish faith tradition, and I am also Chinese American. I am biracial, white Ashkenazi, Jewish, and Chinese American. And both my Jewish heritage and my Chinese American history is so fundamental in so many ways to the work that I do for justice work. So, for example, I'm rooted in the Jewish social justice tradition, the imperative of tikkun olam, of repairing the world, building an olam chesed, a world of love and compassion and justice. And growing up in the reform movement of Judaism, social justice and building a better world was fundamental to what being Jewish meant to me. It was the way that I understood Jewish history, but also the ways that I wanted to take my heritage in this tradition, so vibrant and profound, and show up in the world in a way that was a deep solidarity with people of every faith tradition, of every community, in building a better world. And my Chinese American heritage is also so important to who I am as a person, including my understanding of where I fit into this place called Los Angeles or Southern California because of the sort of nuances and intricacies of my family history, which Phil, really that resonated with me because being Chinese, like my ancestors were not interned, but they were excluded by the Chinese Exclusion Act and other things that were part of that same, dynamic of anti-Asian racism. It's those kind of stories that really inspire me. And those are the stories I love to tell when I am sharing myself with other people and like why I do incredible justice work. And so after a few different paths in life, including going to graduate school in Jewish studies in New York, I fell in love with justice work about, how long is it now? About 6 or 7 years ago. After Trump's election, really, that was the trigger for me to sort of wake me from my complacency and sort of let me know that I need to be involved not just in politics, but in community-led, working class and BIPOC led and centered justice work for racial justice, housing justice, and so much more. And so the first place where I got involved with that, as Steve mentioned, was Bend the Arc, a place where he's involved as well, and a progressive Jewish organization focusing on issues like immigration justice, housing justice, and racial justice, where I just was able to grow as a leader in so many ways that I really don't have time to narrate, but still give me joy and inspiration. Eventually, deepening in my leadership there and in organizations like Never Again Action, another Jewish immigration justice organization, I decided that this sort of path in life or career of politics, but really community and justice organizing is really what I wanted to do. And so eventually I got to where I am now, the LA and Santa Monica organizer at CLU. So what is CLU? Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. We've been around since the 90s. So I think for more than 30 years, founded by so many incredible justice leaders in Southern California that some of you probably know of or know, such as, of course, Reverend James Lawson, and Rabbi Neil Comas Daniels, Reverend Jim Kahn over in Santa Monica, and so many others who decided that not only do we know that it's so powerful and resonant with our faith traditions to be in solidarity with low-wage workers in their struggles and their vision for a more just economy, but we need to have the organization and structure to make that happen. So we're like, we need to build this organization clue so that we can have this structure, this endurance to organize faith communities, to have relationships with labor unions and with workers, and to collectively build the world we want to see. So we organize faith leaders and communities and congregations to show up in solidarity with low-wage workers, whether that's attending a big action, like I'm going to talk about in a bit, or whether that means even like one clergy attending a private negotiation meeting between workers and their management, or anything in between. It means so many things in which the faith communities can use their moral voice and their positions of moral leadership to actually have real and tangible effects on workers and their struggles for justice. And there's so many stories I could tell that really exemplify that the work we do as a faith community actually matters. It actually makes a difference. Not only do the unions and the workers know that because they're also always asking us for support, but like corporations, the management, they know that when we use our moral voice to say it's not just about a contract, it's not just about a policy, but it's about the lives of workers and people in our communities and our religious and faith values of justice, then that's how we make that impact. And that often, so many times, is the thing that carries us across the line to victory. So with that shared, and I definitely welcome further conversations and questions, I'm really excited to talk to you about an incredible campaign that Clue is working on this year with Unite Here Local 11 in order to win transformative contracts and transformative policies for tourism and hospitality workers in Southern California and in Arizona as well. So just a share of hands or affirmations or emojis. Are folks familiar with Unite Here Local 11? See, a lot of folks are. Also, I would be biased to say that I'm so glad to return to ICUJP because some folks might remember that almost a year ago, I joined you all and presented. And actually at that point, it was sort of like a preview of everything that's coming into fruition now. Pastor Bridie Roberts from Unite Here was with me, and we talked about just the general situation, the struggles that workers go through. And we were looking forward to times like right now, the coming weeks and months, where we actually have the opportunity to fight and win. So I'm glad to be with you all again. And hopefully for those who were there at that previous meeting, I forget, probably like July of last year, hopefully these things are coming full circle. Unite Here Local 11 is a labor union that represents hotel workers. So think housekeepers, and housekeepers really are the heart of this union. These incredible leaders, mostly Latina housekeepers who are so brave and courageous in their leadership. So housekeepers, kitchen staff, valets, busboys, servers, waiters, and also like concession workers at LAX. If you go to the airport and get food, that's Unite Here members. Or if you go to Dodger Stadium, Dodger fans, I'm a Dodger fan, anyone else? You get food there, that's Unite Here members who are serving you. SoFi Stadium and so on, and at the convention centers. So we live in Southern California, Los Angeles or beyond, different folks. Our economy and our society here in Los Angeles is really rooted in tourism and hospitality, not only like in the numerical sense in the economy, but also like in our identity, in our heart. But these workers who make this place happen are too often invisible, are too often ignored, and are too often overlooked and not seen. They are going through so many things at this moment that were exacerbated by the COVID pandemic, but really have been going on for a long time. Tourism and hospitality workers are underpaid. They are overworked. They are understaffed, and so much more. And all those things relate to each other, right? And it's really important to know that even as these workers are so fundamental to our economy, they are part of our community, right? We can't just think of them as separate from our community. These are people, your neighbors. These are people who are fundamental to all of our communities, but especially working class and BIPOC communities in Los Angeles that really are part of our identity, in our heart, in our culture. And we have to make sure that we can fight alongside them in solidarity with them, so that, especially with the issue of affordable housing, that is something that I know that we all talk about in other contexts and in general in so many important ways. These workers are not getting paid enough, and housing is not affordable enough for them to actually live, not only in the communities where they grew up, like displacement and gentrification, but even in a reasonable commuting distance from where they work. So many of these workers in West Hollywood, in Beverly Hills, there's so many stories that are actually in some of like the news articles that I've shared in the link, for example, that they've moved out to like the desert, to Apple Valley, Lancaster, Palmdale. They are commuting 2 hours each way every day, spending $80 on gas, sleeping like 3 or 4 hours a night, because that's what they need to do in order to be able to afford where they live. And so at this point, I actually have some really cool video clips to share. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to share the first one. And I hope you guys enjoy. Incredible. So I'm just gonna invite us all to breathe that in a little bit. There's so much to share about like the history of this union, but also Clue in our movement in so many past years and moments like this showing up. And I think some of you probably have been there in some of those times. I think we could spend all day really telling those stories to inspire us, but also that video was really great in telling you just like what's at stake in this moment. So like the tourism industry is roaring back. The corporations are making record profits, but the workers are not seeing their share of that. They're being overworked and really worn out. So many of these, especially housekeepers who have worked at a hotel for 30 years, they're completely worn out in their bodies, and the corporations just view them as disposable, as replaceable, not with the human dignity that we in our faith traditions know that they deserve. And so as the video mentioned, to get us going with what's going on now, we're in this unprecedented moment where more than 100 contracts, mostly hotels, about 65 hotels, and also food concession and related contracts of this local are expiring at the same time. They're expiring at the end of this month on June 30th. And what's going to happen is that workers are going to go on strike, and it's going to be the largest hotel strike in the history of the country, about 17,000 to 20,000 workers. And to give you context, because a lot of strikes are more workers. So tourism, in the tourism industry, usually it's like one hotel at a time. Like each hotel is a separate contract, so it's negotiated one at a time. So this is the largest in history because this is an unprecedented moment where all these contracts are aligned, where they expire at the same time. And we've brought the management to the table that we are negotiating these together because we deserve that instead of divide and conquer, we need transformative policies for all workers all across the board. And the workers have these transformative demands about wages, about healthcare, pensions, fair workloads, and the ability to grow their union, and also about protecting immigrants. Also about racial justice, and also about affordable housing. Affordable housing has been a theme all throughout the past 2 years with our work and with this union, really emphasizing, as I shared, that workers are their problems exacerbated by the affordability crisis and the housing crisis in Southern California, that they're not paid enough to live in their communities or even near where they work. And we deserve not only transformative contracts, but also affordable housing policies so that everyone, all Angelenos, not just these workers, can thrive. And so what's going to happen is all year we've been building momentum. We've been taking action. We've had some big marches with like 1,000 folks actually to give a shout out to Lenore, who was at Stations of the Workers Cross on Good Friday that we did. Our interfaith communities coming together to commemorate the Stations of the Cross in a way that centered the voices of workers. And now what's going to happen is just yesterday, all the workers of this union, thousands of them, came to vote about whether they wanted to authorize a strike. And 96%, it was just announced, they voted to authorize a strike. And we can still negotiate through the end of the month, but basically we know it's going to happen. So now I want to get into the incredible opportunities and of course, open it up for questions.
Quick question for you.
Yes, please.
So one thing that I think Clue is really great about is not only talking about the economic injustices that happen to people, to working people, and with their relationships with their employers and even non-union people. But I also think there's some really great work that's been done in the past on corporate profits and how they have especially in the last 10 years have become something that corporations have hoarded and not given out to the employees at all. You know, it's become something of a CEO and C-level hoarding of cash in an unprecedented level. And I know, mentioning Unite Here is part of the Dodger organization, and considering some of the or there are a lot of their workers are with the Dodger organization, considering some of the issues the Dodgers have had in other big LA entities. Has there been much work with with Clue talking about these amazing profit margins that companies have had from a combination of COVID and inflation over the last few years?
Thank you so much, Rick. That's a wonderful question. Absolutely, the answer is yes. And while we are often, so we always just follow the strategic direction and leadership of like our partners. But often it is the case in so many campaigns that that is not only an effective, but also inseparable part of what's going on to highlight the inequities in our economic system and in our diverse faith traditions, our texts, our rituals, our values. You know, yearn for something better, strive for something better. So often, you know, in the course of like labor struggles, as I mentioned, sometimes even like bringing clergy in conversation with like management at a specific workplace or with even like higher up management, to the extent in which they actually want to have those conversations, is something that's incredibly powerful. I think I can share this because it was public that Rabbi Neil Daniels last year gave like a prayer, a blessing at a negotiating meeting with an employer. And then the employer like put out a press release saying that they were going to walk away from negotiations because they were intimidated by Rabbi Neil, who all basically just said that like his Jewish values and tradition like is in solidarity with worker justice, but they found that intimidating. Of course, that's not our goal, but we are trying to challenge people. And so I think in the stories we tell and the connections we make, it's absolutely the case that we can point out and build those connections about how unjust and really exploitative our system is, but also invite everyone into justice. So we are rooted in the principles of nonviolence that we learned from Reverend Lawson and others. We believe that every person, every human is transformable. Every person can be in conversation with. Every person can be part of our movement. Even those who are our opponents at the time, they are not our enemies. And so even the CEO, even the corporations, we treat them with human dignity and invitation to join us in justice. I see also Steve, you had a question about I can actually give you specifics on that. So a question about how specific wages and benefits have lagged behind the cost of living. A community fact sheet from that about this campaign shares like a lot what's at stake. And another thing I want to mention is that LA is going to be one of the host cities of the World Cup in 2026, and we're going to be the host city of the Olympics in 2028. Of course, there is a very justified, debate and some opposition to the Olympics, but if it's going to happen, and it seems that it is, we know that all this money is going to come into our city, into our region, and we need to fight for these contracts. Why? Because the rest workers are not going to get their fair share of it. They're going to do the labor to make it happen. Then they're going to be cast aside. And that is really part of the urgency of where we are. So I think this is your question, or related to it, Steve. So on average, a hotel housekeeper must work 17 hours a day to afford housing. Of course, even if they wanted to, even if that were sustainable, that's not, what their day is. And the cost of like a 2-bedroom apartment, the cost of housing is far more than that, and also the cost of inflation. So I just want to make sure I read your question, but basically workers are not getting paid enough to meet the rising inflation, but also the cost of living. Because even though the union workers have transformative union contracts, they need to be transformed every 5 years or every 3 years when they expire, because our economy is not just like statistical measures like what inflation is or like what the cost of living is, but our economy is becoming more inequitable. Those at the top earning more of the wealth and workers having less. So that's why we need to use our collective action and the collective bargaining of unions, but also our communal power and solidarity with them to join them in support. So I definitely want to, of course, turn us to, first of all, invite you to check out all these amazing offerings, these articles about what's going on right now with the strike coming up, but also a lot of great, like, sort of in-depth pieces about this focus of housing justice in this union's campaign, and also like what's at stake, because I've been having this conversation probably hundreds of times at this point, but I still feel I can't do it justice because there's just so much to share, including like the stories of workers, of course. But as we prepare for the workers to go on strike in July, there's something completely incredible and unprecedented that's going to happen before that. So I want folks to either now or like when we're done to go to your calendar, and hopefully if you're available to mark your calendar for Thursday, June 22nd at 4 p.m. 4 p.m. is when like the public action will start. Thursday, June 22nd at 4 p.m., where we're going to join together with workers and community allies on Century Boulevard near LAX, where the airport hotels are. So Century Boulevard, sort of in between the 405 and Sepulveda. And we're going to join for an incredible and massive rally in solidarity with workers. So what's the strategy behind this? Before the strike even begins, we know that the workers are taking so much risk. So much is at stake. They're not going to get paid for their work. They're putting their livelihoods at risk because they know that they can fight for something better and more transformative. So we don't want it to go on for a long time. We want to win. We want the workers to do, the companies to do the right thing. And in order to build that leverage, we need the support of the world, of the public, and of the media reaching the public. And so we're going to have this massive action to grab the attention of the world, not just LA, the country and the world, about this place, Los Angeles, all the glamour, right? All the glory of it is really built off of the labor of these workers, and they are unseen, and they deserve their fair share. And all of us deserve a just and dignified society in life, right? So it's going to be an incredibly beautiful rally with songs, chants, testimonies from workers, and so much more. And so I would love to just invite all of you. So there's the link here. The union has their own link, but we definitely want to invite you to sign up with Clue's link, which is just part of the same turnout, but so that we know like who in the faith community is coming out, and so that we can reach out to you directly to see, like, so we can like be together and all that amazing opportunity. As part of that, though, part of that is actually going to be some of the folks who have already been organized, who've already had conversation and made a commitment, doing nonviolent civil disobedience. And as I say those words, I know that might be surprising, because even though I imagine there's some in this group who have done civil disobedience, it's probably been some years, right? Definitely since the beginning of the pandemic. As far as I know, in Los Angeles, there have not been actions in our movement where people have intentionally organized civil disobedience because, of course, of like the COVID health risk. And obviously we're still dealing with COVID, but we feel that, you know, this is an individual decision for folks, but in general, the time is right for this. Those who have done or have seen or been part of civil disobedience know how powerful it is. So I don't want to preach to the choir here, but how incredibly powerful and effective it is for especially like faith leaders to put their bodies on the line to make that sacrifice, even for a short time, right? And in a way that is organized very well to be attendant to everyone's safety and protection, right? But in a way that shows the world what our values are and what this means to us. So just to clarify, we want everyone to turn out. And so if you turn out, you're not risk and rest. But among those who are turning out, if you're interested or you have the capacity, if it's within your life situation to have that conversation, then I want to have that conversation with you. And because the action is on Thursday, the 22nd, and the trainings are next Monday and Tuesday, sorry, the the Monday and Tuesday of the week after, the 19th and the 20th, we only have a week before like we have to close our list. So next week, I would love to have a conversation with folks. So I put my contact information here. Please reach out to me, or you can even like put your email in the chat and I'll send you an email as soon as we're done here. And I'd love to find a time to talk on Zoom next week, either about the civil disobedience opportunity or about any of the ways in which you can support the strike. As far as logistics for the civil disobedience, because this is like a public recorded meeting, I'll save those for our conversations. Just speak to this union that we're working with, Unite Here Local 11, is an incredibly vibrant and accountable, a democratic union in which the workers are the leaders, the workers are the leadership. And especially we're fighting for these things in the contract around pensions, around healthcare, to make sure that we fight for these things so that they're not subject to case by case basis or like people falling through the cracks, but that all these workers are uplifted. And so I think this is an incredible opportunity to do that. But of course, definitely want to also honor where things have fallen short and definitely acknowledge that. So Clue, we're a nonprofit that we organize faith leaders. And the workers that I'm talking about are with a labor union, Unite Here. So we're working in solidarity with this union, but it's the union that is the union of these workers. As a nonprofit, Clue, we do have like a retirement plan for our own employees, but that's separate from what we're talking about with like the hotel workers, which their plans have to be fought for in their contracts. And that's exactly what we're doing in this fight.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for your question. And so I know we want to get into some questions, but we're focusing on this big action. But of course, when the strike happens, we're going to have to show up for the strike in so many ways. So obviously a way to do that is to not cross any picket lines, to not patronize any of these struck hotels. And of course, it's a long list. So if you're actually making plans, feel free to reach out to me and I have that list and I can tell you whether any sort of like hotel or like business is part of this fight or not. But obviously if it is, then we're asking folks to honor that strike. But obviously in terms of ways to support, there's just going to be an endless opportunity to show up to picket lines at these hotels. And the good thing is because there's so many of these, you're not going to have to go far. So whether you live in Beverly Hills or like the West Side or the Valley or Pasadena or the San Gabriel Valley or Orange County or Long Beach or the South Bay or like downtown, there's going to be one of these hotels near you and you can go not too far and join workers at the picket line. Something as we organize congregations and organizations to think about, and this is something I'd love to talk with you in that conversation, is like you have the opportunity to adopt a hotel. So let's say you're a church in the neighborhood of a hotel. And let's say you have like a social justice committee, right? You could organize your folks, like 10 folks or more, or however many, like once a week, like maybe Sunday after services or like another day that works for everyone, to go to that hotel, join the workers there and sort of take leadership of that and build it over numerous weeks, right? So it's an incredible opportunity. And also folks can support the hardship committee. So the workers do get paid from a hardship fund from the union, but obviously it's not as much as like if they were working, as much as that needs to increase as well. So there's going to be a lot of fundraising and donations of food, of money to support these workers. The last thing I want to briefly mention, and people we can discuss if we have conversations, but also I have the links here, is we're also working with SEIU, USWW, and LANE, Los Angeles Alliance for a New Economy, to pass in LA City Council a tourism worker living wage ordinance, which very simply put would raise the minimum wage for tourism workers to $25 immediately, and then $1 each year until $30 an hour in 2028, which is the year of the Olympics. And the strategy behind that is, as much as the union fights for its members who are unionized workers, we still want to uplift workers who, either because they don't want to or haven't organized to or have been suppressed by their management are not unionized. So the way we do that is through policy, by getting the city to say across the board, not hotel by hotel, this is the minimum wage for these workers because it's what they deserve, it's what they need to survive, and so much more. To sort of put the context here, there's a one pager that I encourage you to reach out and more. But simply put, we're going to pass this policy that raises the minimum wage, essentially for non-union tourism workers, because of course union workers have their contracts that they negotiate. For those who know LA City Council politics, Hugo Soto Martinez and Corinne Price are the probably the top two leaders so far on this, but a number of other city council members are behind it. And of course, we're going to win and make this happen. If we make both of these things happen in 1 year, a transformative contract and a city council policy for non-union workers, it's just going to transform our society.
I've been so impressed by the stories of the workers and the backbreaking work that is demanded of them in hotels. The quotas in cleaning hotel rooms and the demands that are placed largely on women and largely women of color. Do you have some examples of the kind of working conditions that seem a throwback to an earlier era of the last century in terms of the demands placed on hotel workers, the quotas they must meet, and the number of hotel rooms that they are required to clean, and some of the injuries and impairments that have resulted from that kind of backbreaking work?
Yes, thank you, Steve, for a really important question. And as you pointed out, when we're able to hear the stories of workers, to be in conversation with them, but also to have them share in a group setting, that is often the most effective way and the most inspiring way to really realize what's at stake, right? Because I hope that I've inspired you all, but also sometimes when it's not a worker, it's just sort of like, yeah, this is what's going on. It's important, but I know other things are important too. But like when the workers share their stories, it really brings it home, right? I have a story I want to share that's been part of this campaign, and a bit about sort of like the housing connection. But Steve, to your question, not one worker's story, but sort of like what I've learned collectively from being in conversation from so many of them. Absolutely. So I think especially for housekeepers up until recently, actually, because of this transformative policy we passed this last year, but still to a large extent are overworked, as I shared, but overworked doesn't really do justice to it. So as Steve mentions, during the early part of the pandemic in early 2020, a lot of hotels fired their workers or laid off their workers because, there's a pandemic, hotels are closed. Maybe all those things were right in terms of public policy. I think they were. But we deserve like labor policies in which when a disaster like this happens, we don't sacrifice the workers, right? The workers still have the right to return to their job when those places open up. And they have like severance, or they have policies in place to take care of them when they're out of the job for something which is beyond their control, right? But that wasn't the case at so many of these places. And we actually had to fight in 2021 to get passed and Governor Newsom to sign a retention and recall law, which is now in effect, that actually guarantees that workers who were laid off because of the pandemic, when their workplaces open up, they have the priority, they have the right to return to work. But I mentioned that also because even as workers are returning to work, the employers have taken the opportunity that they're still making these record profits as people want to get out of their quarantine, out of their isolation, and get back into the world. But the hotels are like, okay, we're not going to hire as many workers as we did. And we're going to have fewer workers who are going to work more. And especially in the past 2 years, even more so than before, that's been so dire, so unbearable for these housekeepers especially. And so not only have they had quotas of like how many hotel rooms they have to clean a day. Another thing is that the lack of automatic room cleaning has been a real struggle in a lot of hotels. And I know that's something that different people as customers of hotels have struggled with. Obviously, during the pandemic, when it was like a concern of like being in physical, of like people touching the spaces where we were in, then maybe it made sense not to have automatic everyday room cleaning. But that just makes it harder for the housekeepers. The housekeepers, if someone stays in a hotel for 3 days, and then the housekeepers have to clean after they leave after 3 days, it's so much harder. It's so much more backbreaking work than just the automatic daily room cleaning. And so we've had to fight for policies like that we won last year in a ballot initiative that we gathered signatures for, that also guaranteed that housekeepers can only be required to clean a certain amount of square feet of hotel rooms a day, or if they had to clean more than that, they get like double compensation. But Steve, I don't think I'm doing justice, because really, we want a worker to tell their story. But not only are there like quotas and stuff like that, but also there's still such a concern and such a prevalence of sexual harassment, sexual assault, especially for housekeepers, especially in like vulnerable situations, and abuse from customers and from management. There's really just this culture in so many of these places of unaccountability and what's the word, like, yeah, unaccountability, and just anything goes, that these workers can be taken advantage of because they're replaceable, because they're expendable. And
Maybe a quick,
yeah, please.
thank you. That was very helpful. But maybe a quick way
Mhm.
is to ask you, what are the demands of the current strike? What are you striking over?
Mhm.
When we talk to our friends and families about this strike, we'll be asked, oh no, the union is just feather bedding and enhancing. They've already won all of these rights. So what are your demand, or what are the union's demands currently that they are prepared to strike over?
Thank you. That's a great question. So these policies, these demands are simple, but they're also complex, right? They obviously fit into many pages of proposals to the management, but I can absolutely answer in like 5 simple pillars, which are in fact the ways in which the union is describing their demands, their policy, their proposal. So the first is wages. Obviously, it actually goes without saying for any union renewal contract that there is a raise, but we know absolutely that there needs to be one, because these workers are underpaid. So I forget the exact numbers, but there's a transformative wage increase in the union's proposal. I think like up to like $35 an hour for a lot of kinds of workers. And really, even that is not really what they deserve, but it's still transformational in this economy. The second pillar is workload. And that's really something that I was just focusing on, right? It's also something that like the writer's strike, they focused on, because of like, they want minimal staffing levels so that the small amount of workers are not overworked, right? So workload has to be manageable, whether that's a specific number of like how many square feet of hotel rooms you're cleaning a day, or any other measure for any other kind of worker. Manageable workloads. Number 3 is better pensions, because workers have to be able to retire with dignity. Number 4 is better healthcare, because often their healthcare is not cutting it. And number 5 is the ability to grow their union. So basically, for employers to commit to neutrality, that when a new hotel is built, or when a new restaurant that's covered by this union is built, that yes, it's still the workers who have to vote to unionize. It's still their democracy, but the union's not going to do union busting. I'm sure some of you know so much about union busting and the things that the employers do, which I think that's a whole other conversation that there'd be amazing speakers who could speak to. But they're not going to do those things. They're going to commit to neutrality and let the workers have their democracy and decide. In addition to those 5 pillars, there's the other things I mentioned, like committing not to use E-Verify for immigration. So like not to victimize immigrants in their employment, or subject them to the immigration enforcement system. Juneteenth as a paid holiday and other racial justice measures. And with the affordable housing, who's been to a hotel recently and noticed all these like crazy fees in your bill? Like you book the hotel room and you see like a base rate, and then you have all these fees with weird names that you don't know what they're for. And that's really just how hotels make more money, that they trick you into paying. We think they should get rid of all those fees and instead add a 7% fee, which is to build affordable housing for the workers of that industry, affordable housing for hotel and hospitality workers. We think that's fair to consumers, especially because all those other fees are ridiculous. But it's just going to be so transformational. And so far, the employers are like, it's a non-starter. We don't even want to do this. And actually, the auction we're doing on June 22nd is really focused on that housing aspect of the campaign. So yeah, I hope that answered some of the questions about what's actually in the demands. And I think, Rick, if you can direct, I think different people have questions.
I'm seeing on the screen, Carol Francis. You have a question.
Yes, thank you. In my solo show tomorrow, I'm talking about my life and how I grew from a absolutely apolitical, don't talk politics around me, to politically active. And it was at a meeting in which the farm workers' issues and conditions were discussed, followed by what the farm workers are doing to change the situation, followed by how I could get involved by boycotting grapes and Gallo wine. And instead of laying on this injustice plus this one and this one and this one, it goes to that. And I was really struck by how your presentation did exactly that. And that's rare, and that's really good. Is there a handout, a single sheet somewhere that you pass out to people that don't know any of this, and then we'll talk about the event in Century City and encourage people to get there and kind of lay out what we can do to get people there?
Great question, Carol Francis. Thank you. There is a flyer for the action that has like a QR code that links to like the union's like general sign up form. But you could that would still be useful. And also like just to share the form, you could sign up with the other forum, but just we want to sort of bring our faith contingent together. So I could share that. And also there is like this, there's like the 2-pager background document on the actual like campaign negotiation and the demands that I could share with that. There is a challenge in working with the unions or sort of the organizing that unions do is because of the sensitive nature of what they do and sort of like the opportunities for corporations to like sort of surveil them or to challenge them legally. Sometimes they're very careful about like what they put out publicly. So that actually just is an invitation or a challenge in the work that we do, is that a lot of our organizing happens like in one-on-one conversations and not like in big email blasts. But I think at this point, we definitely have those basic resources that I'm thinking how I would send those, but I can actually add them to the doc. I can like put them in a Google Drive and then add them to the same document. So if you guys just hold on to that Google Doc that I've made, I'm just going to add things to it, and that'll be the best way for me to add that. And I'll just make it clear what it is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So how you can get that is when you open that link that Matthew sent at the beginning of his talk for that Google Doc, just keep it open. Don't close it, and it'll be added, I guess, later on today. Also, in the invite that you guys got for this forum, there's the website for Clue and also the sign-up sheet for the 22nd as well. So you can find out about it that way. So I'm looking, Lenora, I know you had your hand up earlier. Did you have a question or comment that you wanted to
Uh,
present?
to respond to the demands, which Matthew reviewed at the Bonaventure gathering. I was impressed with the listing
Mhm.
of demands, one of which, besides not using E-Verify for immigration, was to not use past incarceration as
Yes.
a measure for employment. And now I want to know, have negotiations been proceeding and there's been no progress? What's happening? What has happened?
Yes, thank you, Lenore, for all your leadership this year and beyond, and also for sharing that additional. I mean, there's so many more as well that I haven't shared, probably. That really important aspect of this contract that is not just about wages, though we shouldn't discount how material and how important wages are, but are also about this broad immigrant and housing and racial justice platform. So there have been a few negotiation meetings. The first one, which I think Lenore is the one you went to, was in April, and it was like a big meeting with hundreds of folks where the union presented their proposals. There have been a number of negotiation meetings since then, and being careful in what I say, sort of on a recorded meeting. I think I can just say basically that the employers are not taking it seriously. They're not going too well, and we're preparing for a strike, which has just been authorized. That's the gist of it. Yeah.
So Sophia, you had a question.
Yeah, well, I'm just amazed. I saw your
Mhm.
presentation last year, and to see it come to fruition, oh my gosh, on steroids. I loved it. I think, and then, I was dealing with the McDonald's workers, and they're living in their cars. So I was,
Yes.
I was wanting to ask regarding how it is, the fee. How would it go? Would be in where would it go to? Who would control it? Would there be a special fund set up to do the housing? Could you elaborate more? Because I think that conservatives will attack it, so it'd be good to figure out how it's going to be handled.
Thank you so much, Sophia, and also for that, really, for sharing with me. I wasn't aware of the situation at that McDonald's, and definitely all for that solidarity, and I'll share that with our folks at Clue and see how we can be in solidarity with that. Yeah, so with the housing fee, which right now is a proposal, right? So the final form will, if we actually win and succeed in having that be part of the contract, the final form would depend on what's negotiated. But my understanding is that it would be in partnership between the union and the employers to implement, with obviously input, strategic input, and leadership from people on the ground, housing justice organizations and stakeholders. Also, there's so much more to say over, I had the honor last election season last year to work on Measure ULA. I think when I presented last July, it was right before I had started working on that, and I was sort of previewing it. But of course we won, so celebrate that victory. But Unite Here Local 11 was also on the steering committee of that, and that was part of the same kind of idea that we need the real estate system, the economic system, to pay its fair share so that workers and all communities have affordable and supportive housing. So sometimes that might look like a LA City fund from taxes. That's what Measure ULA is, even though it's going through its implementation struggles and it's really shameful. That's a whole other topic, but it could also look like something that's built into a contract like this. And I think that's really exciting.
Great. One question I had too was, the connection between Clue and Unite Here is kind of endemic to and unique to Southern California, and with the connections between the hospitality industry and tourism industry, and having an effective labor voice to be able to support that. Is there and I think maybe one of the reasons is just Los Angeles and Southern California's entertainment industry's moneymaker. Have you has this gone to this kind of working together with unions and nonprofits as far as economic justice? Have you been able to share that in other areas? I would think Florida would be a really great place to do that. Is there any information that you might have about other places that have taken the blueprint of Clue and Unite Here and been able to run with it?
Thank you, Rick, for that's a really great question. I think there's so much there and more that I want to learn about what's going on in different places. I think the answer probably is there are folks in different parts of the country who are doing faith-rooted labor justice work. I mean, obviously, for so many of our faith traditions, I think for all of them, but like in Jewish progressive history, we have a very strong labor justice tradition. Of course, there's a very deeply resonant Catholic worker justice tradition. That's just like two examples, right? So on one hand, this stuff is fundamental to our faith traditions, but also it's not always like the most popular issue that even like faith-rooted organizing spaces are drawn to. And so I think there are definitely folks around the country doing that. Not necessarily that they got it from us. I mean, hopefully there are, but like it could be, just in different directions and just from the same like shared values and heritage. I do know, I don't remember the name, so I don't want to missay it, but like in Florida, there's it's called the Coalition of, I think it's Amachuli workers, but that could be wrong, but it's like a coalition of like faith communities in solidarity with indigenous workers in a part of Florida, and I actually want to learn more and be able to share what that's about. I think that's an example. But I think while that's happening in different parts of the country, I think you're onto something, Rick, that it is unique, the work we do, because sometimes it's a hard sell, even within our own faith communities, to do labor justice work, to do worker justice work, because doing this kind of work in the ways in which we frame it, in which we do it, challenges the inherent justness, the inherent stability or of our system, of our economic system. Like even as we do social justice work and we know that racism exists, that different things are not what they are in our society, not what they should be, like there's often this tendency to just accept that our economic system is what it is because it's right, even though we know that it's not, that those who are rich deserve to be rich, that those who are poor deserve to be poor, that workers deserve to be precarious, and all these excuses and all these things we might say to justify it, right? Our movement is rooted in our faith values, that we know that that's not the case. We know that however we might express it in our faith tradition, that God aspires for a world where all people, all workers, all people in our community have dignity and justice, that no one is exploited, that no one is viewed as replaceable or expendable or with lack of value. And sometimes in different faith communities, it is a challenge to reach people because of that inherent idea, but also because of these fears of how that might destabilize other things in our economy. But we know that if we never challenge our system to actually build something better, then it's never going to change. And so we're rooted in this deeply rooted, decades, centuries long struggle with so many predecessors, with so many spiritual and movement ancestors. But we're also moved by the youth in our movement, right? The youth leaders who, in so many other issues like gun violence, racial justice, climate, have taken the lead. And I think LA has this reputation in decades centuries past of being a labor busting town, of being an anti-labor town. And that was the history, like in certain, like the way it happened in like the early 1900s. But even then there were workers who resisted. And there are actually some of the articles I shared in my document. We're in an unprecedented moment for the labor movement right now in Southern California. And I'm just so excited to see where it takes us.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the big turning points that you mentioned from LA and Southern California being a labor busting town was the effect in the 70s of the UFW, Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, and how they were able to not only coordinate with workers and get actions going, but get the public opinion changed and get news coverage that was supportive for once, for workers. So that is something to think about.
I'm fascinated by what you keep mentioning, and that is the faith-based roots of Judaism. I mean, the roots, the social justice, labor justice. It's like, for what percentage Jews are to, let's say, Los Angeles or California or US populations, why are so many of the why are so many activists in for peace and justice, particularly around Palestine, but around issues of social justice? Why are Jews so disproportionately part of that group? What is it in the tradition that you keep mentioning? Tell us about that.
Thank you, Carol Francis. That's an amazing question. And another one which I think would take all day to really do justice to. And for those of us on what we call the Jewish left, it's just fundamental to who we are. Regardless of like whether it's disproportionate or not, there is this, as you mentioned, deeply rooted in strong and vibrant Jewish social justice tradition that comes both from like the Jewish faith and Jewish texts and the Torah and the Talmud and Jewish religion, and also from this incredibly vibrant, these are simplistic distinctions, but like this incredibly vibrant secular and radical socialist Yiddish speaking tradition, especially. I think instead of doing justice to that question, because it's like up for debate, really, I think I'll just mention one thing that connects with the campaign that I'm talking to you about. Unite Here Local 11. You spell it usually with all caps and an exclamation mark, but the Unite and the Here are themselves both acronyms because they used to be separate unions that had a merger like a few decades ago. And even those, I think, were mergers of previous unions. And so one of the ancestor unions to Unite Here nationwide is the International Ladies Garment Workers Union.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big name for people in labor history, both on the East Coast, because on the East Coast, you think of the strike of the 20,000 in New York City, or it could have been strike of the 10,000, I forget. And also like the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. Sometimes that history is told with an East Coast focus, but also we have that here. Do folks know that in 1933, there was a garment workers strike in Los Angeles? And we're talking about 1933. So like this idea of LA as an anti-union town, that was like the height of like that, right? And the International Lady Garment Workers Union, which began with like a sort of Protestant male leadership, but eventually became dominated by Jewish and Italian women on the East Coast. It was actually organizers like Ukrainian Jewish Rose Pasoda who came to LA. And my friend Shmuel in Boyle Heights tells the story very powerfully, but people thought that LA was unorganizable. One reason, not only because of the anti-union culture, but also because people did not want to try or did not think that like Latinos, often who spoke Spanish, could be organized. I know that's ridiculous to think now, because like Latinos and Latinas are now the heart of unions like Unite Here Local 11 in so many inspiring ways. But in the 30s, the white leadership was like, they're unorganizable, don't even try. But someone like the Jewish Rose Pasoda knew, because Jews speak lots of different languages and have to like translate and have to talk to each other, that he knew that if you want to organize folks, you have to speak to them in their language, like in Spanish. And they successfully organized thousands of workers and had a strike in 1933. And that's part of the heritage of this union that is both part of the Jewish labor tradition, to speak to your question, Carol Francis, but also part of the deep heritage that we're building on now. So like, don't get it wrong. We're not starting from scratch. We're in the footsteps of all of our ancestors and our spiritual movement ancestors as well.
Rick, real quick as we end, it's even older than that, Matthew. We are celebrating 100 years since Upton Sinclair went out to San Pedro to support the IWW striking longshoremen's union, and Upton Sinclair was arrested for reading the Bill of Rights, and the meetings that organized, including faith leaders, led to the founding of the first affiliate of the ACLU outside of New York City, here in Los Angeles. So in 30 seconds, I've tied my ACLU history to the labor history of Los Angeles. And those were some of the earliest efforts to organize, to support unions, to support workers. So there's a long and wonderful tradition. And finally, based on Carol Francis's question, many of you know the Martin Niemöller poem in the Nazi era, after listing, first they came for the communists and no one spoke up, and I didn't speak up, his poem says, and then they came for the Jews and no one spoke up. So that Jewish link to the suppression of individual rights, to discrimination, to bigotry is deep and long-lasting. I think it explains what you're identifying, Carol Francis. And to complete the loop, it certainly, we've seen today, has motivated Matthew Hom for the kind of extraordinary work that he is doing. And as we finish up, we are so grateful to you, Matthew. We will push out all of the materials today. We will encourage support for the June 22nd action, whether people stand in solidarity and or engage in civil disobedience is an individual choice. We know that Matthew, that Unite Here, that Clue, a solid supporter. James Lawson was a founder of ICUJP. All of that is tied together in a tremendous coalition. And I believe the arc of history bends toward justice, and that we are winning these labor battles. And with strength and solidarity, this union will win this strike, so long as everybody, everybody on this screen. And when I invited Matthew, I promised him that every person that attends these meetings are themselves connected to other organizations, to congregations, to groups. So please spread the word. I know that Rick will separately push out on email and social media all of these materials, as well as the recording. I'm asking Rick to prioritize the release of this recording as soon as possible, given the timeliness of this program. And I think Matthew was very diplomatic and careful in his remarks, so this program can be publicly released without compromising anything. And I just want to finish by thanking you, Matthew, from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Steve and Rick and all of you for joining us in this transformational work to build our beloved community. I know we're going to win. And as we say in the union, sí se puede.
Yep.
Sí se puede.
Thank you very much. And you know, this a few years ago, we had when ICUJP was meeting in Emmanuel, we had a really great program with folks from CLU and Unite Here called Working Class Heroes, and from the John Lennon song. And I think that not only the people that you are working with in the unions are working class heroes, but yourself and the folks at CLU very much embody that description. So thank you very, very much.